Recap. Tales of Herding Gods, Chapter 4 and 33. Chapter. When the divine flood dragon king witnessed Chinmu lying flat upon the ground, feigning death alongside the others, the mighty monarch of flood dragons was utterly bewildered. He was a god, an exalted sovereign among flood dragons, revered and majestic. How could a being of such stature possibly escape danger by shamelessly pretending to be dead like Hulinger and the others? Thump. The divine flood dragon king abruptly collapsed to the ground. His limbs twisted awkwardly as he sprawled across the floor, and the miserable appearance of his corpse seemed even more tragic than Chinmu's. Anyone who saw it could easily tell this was not the first time he had resorted to such disgraceful tactics. The enormous head descended slowly. Its eyes seemed unfocused, as though its vision were poor. The colossal stone face swept across the ground, brushing over their bodies while everyone held their breath and remained absolutely motionless. Ish! The stone statue released a long, hissing breath before slowly straightening its towering body and walking back into the darkness. Its heavy footsteps thudded across the ground, gradually fading into the distance. This stone statue seems to be searching for something. Chinmu suddenly sprang to his feet and began pondering deeply. Where did it come from? The Great Ruins? Or perhaps another world entirely? And what exactly is it searching for? Hulinger and the Flood Dragons quickly climbed to their feet as well. The divine Flood Dragon King dusted himself off, attempting to regain his dignity. Hulinger clapped her hands and praised him cheerfully. Divine Flood Dragon King, among all of us, you're truly the best at playing dead. You must have practiced it many times before. When you're free, you should teach me a few tricks. The divine Flood Dragon King's face immediately flushed red as he muttered indignantly, I did not. Don't speak nonsense. Playing dead requires natural talent. Chinmu had already begun walking forward again. Let's continue searching. Everyone stay alert. We have no idea if there are more stone statues lurking here. Divine Flood Dragon King, what do you think about the one we just encountered? The Dragon King pondered for a moment before answering slowly. That stone statue most likely did not originate from the Great Ruins. Chinmu was slightly startled. Not from the Great Ruins? Why do you say that? The stone statues in the Great Ruins have endured countless years of wind, rain, frost, and snow. Every single one of them appears ancient and weathered. But the statue we saw earlier looked extremely clean and fresh, as if it had only recently turned into stone. Still, the divine Flood Dragon King could not be completely certain. However, there are some very strange stone statues within the Great Ruins. It is possible that one of them was hidden within a sealed space where wind and rain could not reach it. Chinmu murmured quietly to himself as he contemplated the matter. Could it be that numerous stone statues were buried beneath the God-broken mountain range? When the mountain range was destroyed, did they awaken and rise to the surface? That possibility certainly exists, the divine Flood Dragon King replied. Your Majesty, the dragon-rearing sovereign once mentioned that the origins of the God-broken mountain range were extremely suspicious. That mountain range surrounded the Great Ruins, separating it from eternal peace. Inside the Great Ruins, everything was chaotic and strange, yet outside its borders the world remained peaceful and normal. There must have been something unusual about the God-broken mountain range itself. As they ventured deeper into this mysterious place, the gray fog thickened and the darkness grew heavier. The air itself seemed dull and oppressive, carrying a suffocating stillness, capable of driving a person mad. From far away, waves of trembling vibrations from the earthquake cauldron echoed faintly through the ground. Chinmu walked toward the source of those tremors. Not long afterward, they encountered a second stone statue. This one also appeared to be wandering around as though it were searching for something. The divine Flood Dragon King's guess makes sense, Chinmu thought to himself as he carefully avoided the statue. These stone statues most likely originated from beneath the God-broken mountain range. The ability of the God-broken mountain range to restrain the peculiarities of the Great Ruins had always been strange. What kind of power allowed that mountain range to block the endless darkness of the Great Ruins? When Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had used the earthquake cauldron to shatter the God-broken mountain range, the darkness of the Great Ruins expanded outward by over 100 miles. That alone proved that the mountain range truly possessed the power to contain the darkness. The mountain range likely appeared after the founding Emperor Empire had collapsed and the region transformed into the Great Ruins. Qin had once heard rumors that a certain god had created the God-broken mountain range to divide eternal peace and the Great Ruins, preventing the inhabitants of the Great Ruins from entering eternal peace. According to those rumors, when the creator of the mountain range reached the region of Mount Meru, they discovered someone standing atop the Great Thunderclap Monastery. Because of that presence, the creator detoured around the monastery. No one could confirm whether the story was true. But if the god who created the mountain range truly existed, it was possible that they had also buried countless stone statues beneath it. Young Master, could this stone statue be one of the ones that appeared inside Eternal Peace Empire? Hoolinger asked curiously. Qin froze slightly in surprise. Hoolinger continued thoughtfully. Perhaps they are the god statues from near the God-broken mountain range. Many gods of high heavens and powerful cultivators died in that region. The stone statues might be using their remains as sacrificial offerings to revive themselves. But because the sacrifices weren't enough, they can't fully awaken and can only move around partially. That possibility exists as well, Qin said slowly, though suspicion lingered in his voice. But if that's the case, what exactly are these stone statues searching for? Obviously, they're searching for the earthquake cauldron that shattered the God-broken mountain range, Hoolinger declared confidently. The earthquake cauldron must be their weapon. They need to find it in order to release its full power. Even though Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor used it to destroy the mountain range, he probably didn't unleash everything hidden inside it. Linger is truly clever. Qin praised her warmly. The little fox puffed up proudly. However, Qin continued after a moment of thought, shaking his head. Since these stone statues can move freely, why don't they search for other meteorological weapons instead? That would be much easier. Furthermore, this place is still trembling, which means the earthquake cauldron is continuously releasing its power. The stone statues should easily be able to locate it by following the tremors. Because of that, your guess is probably incorrect. The Divine Flood Dragon King's explanation seems more logical. Hoolinger's pride instantly vanished. At that moment, Qin suddenly froze. Without warning, he collapsed onto the ground again and began playing dead. Heavy footsteps echoed from the darkness ahead. A tall stone statue was slowly approaching them. Qin narrowed his eyes slightly. On the statue's back were numerous stone flags. Although they too had petrified, each flag contained a huge eye embedded within it. The sight looked extremely bizarre. Clumps of black chi streamed into the flags behind the statue. Gradually, one of the eyes began transforming from stone into flesh and blood. The eye slowly regained life, becoming a real eyeball. It rolled within the flag restlessly, appearing extremely crude and unstable. Clearly, the energy it absorbed was insufficient for it to completely break free from its petrified state. A devil eye? That stone statue is a devil! Qin felt his scalp tingle violently and nearly leapt to his feet in shock. If it was a devil, then it absolutely could not be a statue buried beneath the God-broken mountain range. The creatures that roamed the darkness of the Great Ruins were devils. They were not afraid of the strangeness of the Great Ruins, because they themselves were the embodiment of that very strangeness. Qin had once encountered a devil god in the darkness before. That creature had lured him forward, making him mistakenly believe he had reached Carefree Village, when in truth he had wandered to the outskirts of Fengdu. Village chief had even fought against that devil god. That doesn't make sense, Qin thought anxiously. If these stone statues are devil gods, why would they become stone statues? The devil gods I saw before were all full of vitality. Countless thoughts raced through his mind. Suddenly, a possibility flashed across his consciousness. The world these stone statues came from was not the world overlapping with the Great Ruins and Eternal Peace. They were not devil gods native to the Great Ruins. They had come from another world entirely. Because they crossed into a different world, their physical bodies had turned into stone, while their powers remained outside. What exactly is happening in this place? Chinmu's thoughts became muddled. At night within the great ruins, 3 to 5 different worlds overlapped with each other. But now that the god-broken mountain range had collapsed, an entirely new world had appeared. Is this new world about to overlap with eternal peace as well? How could something so unimaginable occur? Just as he reached that thought, the devil eye on the flag rolled across the surroundings. Suddenly, its gaze fell upon Chinmu and the others lying motionless on the ground. A playful glint appeared within the eye. Fear instantly gripped Chinmu's heart. The flag suddenly detached itself from the stone statue's back and dropped directly in front of them. Chinmu immediately abandoned the act of playing dead. He sprang to his feet and shouted loudly, "Divine Flood Dragon King!" Upon hearing the call, the Divine Flood Dragon King instantly transformed into his original dragon form. Chinmu grabbed Hulinger and leapt onto the dragon's back. The dragon Qilin quickly led the other flood dragons to climb up as well. With a thunderous roar, the Divine Flood Dragon King shot forward like a streak of lightning. Behind them, the stone statue turned around. Its massive hand slammed downward with terrifying speed. The Divine Flood Dragon King roared furiously as all the vital chi within his body erupted outward, transforming into a surging flood. The flood condensed into a long river that rapidly wrapped itself around the statue's arm, attempting to crush it with overwhelming force. But the stone arm merely bent slightly before straightening again. In that instant, the divine art of the Flood Dragon King shattered completely. A chill ran down his spine. "Your Majesty?" "It's a true god," he shouted in terror. "It should be a true devil," Chinmu corrected. The stone statue lifted its legs and caught up to them within only a few steps. Its other hand slammed downward again. The Divine Flood Dragon King narrowly dodged the attack. Meanwhile, the stone flag soared into the air before landing once more on the ground. The devil eye continued staring intently at the fleeing group. Whenever the Dragon King managed to gain some distance, the petrified flag would suddenly leap forward again, landing close to them. It hopped forward like a living banner. The stone statue relies on that eye to see. Without it, the devil god won't be able to locate us. Chinmu suddenly understood. He quickly retrieved the Sun Jade Eye from his Tao Ti sack. Without hesitation, he placed it on the dragon's back and activated it. A blazing sun divine ray burst forth, tearing through the darkness and fog as it sliced directly toward the eye on the flag. The devil eye instantly fired a black ray in response, intercepting the sun divine ray. Chinmu simultaneously grabbed the moon jade eye with his other hand and adjusted its direction. A thin blade of moonlight shot forward. Wherever the light passed, space itself solidified into tangible substance. The combined rays of sun and moon shattered the black ray from the devil eye and destroyed the eye completely. The petrified flag was left with nothing but a broken hole. Using the moon jade eye and sun jade eye together produces even greater power. Chinmu suppressed the astonishment rising within his heart and looked toward the stone statue. The statue's movements suddenly stopped. It tilted its ears slightly, as though trying to listen for something. "Don't move," Chinmu whispered. The Divine Flood Dragon King immediately halted. "Walk slowly," Chinmu continued softly. "Don't hurry." The Dragon King cautiously crept forward, fearful of making any sound. Chinmu stared intently at the stone statue. It seemed confused, wandering around as it smashed and kicked at its surroundings, yet it could no longer detect them. Suddenly, the Divine Flood Dragon King froze. "Your Majesty," he said with a trembling voice. "Keep walking," Chinmu replied without turning around. "Your Majesty, look ahead," the Dragon King croaked. Hulinger's voice trembled as well. "Young Master, look ahead." "Ahead?" Chinmu was slightly puzzled. He turned his head to look forward. The moment he saw what they were staring at, his entire body froze. His eyes widened as if his soul had been struck out of him. Behind them, the stone statue continued smashing everything in its path as it slowly closed in. But Chinmu seemed completely unaware of the danger now. After a long moment, he finally murmured in a dazed voice, "Imperial Preceptor, what have you done?" Editor, Dark Gem. Before their eyes, heaven and earth appeared as thought they had been forcibly stitched together. The already bizarre spectacle had become even more astonishing because between the two realms yawned a colossal circular breach. It was a sight beyond easy description. The sky had once been nothing but endless emptiness. yet now had been torn open as though a gigantic wound had been blasted through it. The earth below was immeasurably thick and boundless. Even if someone had drilled an enormous pit through it should not have been pierced so easily. Yet now it had been penetrated cleanly, creating a vision so inconceivable that it stirred awe and disbelief in the hearts of all who beheld it. At the critical moment, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor must have wielded the earthquake cauldron, borrowing the divine might of that meteorological weapon. With its terrifying power, he had pierced through the land and sky of this world and another, forcing the two realms to intersect and forming this majestic and terrifying passage. Moreover, the might of the earthquake cauldron was simply too immense. Even now, the scar left between the two worlds had not healed. The barriers that normally separated the realms could not restore themselves. Before the gigantic opening, the great ruins and eternal peace empire lay shrouded in night. Yet beyond the hole, a sun was slowly rising, its radiance illuminating a towering Black Devil castle. The sky of that other world rested beneath the horizon of the God-broken mountain range, while its land floated high above the same range. From Chinmu's vantage point, he could clearly see the ground of that strange world. Jagged structures pierced the land like weapons thrust toward the heavens. Buildings shaped like long sabers, towering swords, and immense spears. Each of them reached 10,000 feet into the sky, standing densely packed together like an endless forest of blades. Their architecture was entirely different from the constructions of Eternal Peace. Grim and sinister devil castles were scattered across massive mountains that stretched endlessly into the distance. Some even hovered in the air itself. The rising sun shone upon those dark fortresses, casting enormous shadows across the God-broken mountain range. The trees and mountains of that world possessed twisted, grotesque forms. They bent and contorted in ways that seemed unnatural, radiating a terrifying aura. Sunlight from the other world streamed upward from the ground and fell upon Chinmu and the others. Standing before the vast circular breach, they appeared as tiny as ants. The foreign sunlight stretched their shadows into long shapes, yet compared with the gigantic whole, those shadows were thin and insignificant. Beneath their feet hung the sun, while the land of the other world hovered above their heads. It felt as though they were standing before a mirror that reflected reality upside down. Even more unsettling, the enormous breach continued to tremble gently. The continuous vibrations caused the surrounding rocks of the God-broken mountain range to lift slowly into the air. Chinmu and the others felt their bodies grow numb from the trembling. Even their primordial spirits began to waver and lose stability. One could scarcely imagine what kind of catastrophic power had erupted when Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had activated the Earthquake Cauldron. The earthquakes here are coming from the hole. It isn't Imperial Preceptor who's still using Earthquake Cauldron. Chinmu's heart sank. Since entering the God-broken mountain range, he had repeatedly sensed tremors. He had believed that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was continuing to operate the Earthquake Cauldron. Never had he imagined that the tremors were emanating from the enormous breach connecting the two worlds. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was nowhere to be found. Whether he was alive or dead remained unknown. Chinmu raised his head and gazed toward the land floating high in the sky. Upon that suspended world stood a powerful devil god. His primordial spirit had emerged from his body, while his corporeal form had turned to stone. Around the petrified devil god, countless strange devils bustled like tireless ants. They surrounded the stone body while constructing a vast sacrificial altar. Tens of thousands of slaves were being led upward toward the altar to be slaughtered, their blood forming a sacrificial offering meant to send the devil god statue across the worlds. A wizard adorned with white bones and feathers upon his head stood upon the altar chanting incantations. Streams of blood flowed across the ritual platform. The gruesome scene was reflected clearly in the eyes of Chinmu and the others. It was a cruel kind of beauty. The spectacle was shocking, savage, and terrifying. That world still existed within a barbaric age drenched in blood. Their divine arts were primitive and brutal, saturated with the scent of slaughter. Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor can be said to have brought enormous trouble. Chinmu felt his scalp crawl with unease. The Earthquake Cauldron had torn open a path to another world, and within that world, there appeared to be countless devil gods. When those beings discovered the world of Eternal Peace Empire, they would naturally rejoice at the appearance of fresh prey. The desire to conquer must have surged within their hearts. They were even willing to petrify their own bodies to cross into eternal peace. Yet something strange troubled Chinmu. After the stone statues of the devil gods crossed the breach, they did not immediately perform another sacrifice to widen the hole created by the earthquake cauldron. Instead, they were searching the surroundings for something. Besides, the hole is so huge, why can't we see any devils coming through it? Chinmu murmured in confusion. The divine flood dragon king seemed to have noticed something. Your Majesty, he said, the army of devils is on the sacrificial altar over there. Chinmu turned his gaze in that direction, and fear instantly flooded his heart. In that distant region, the slaves of the devil world were constructing an even larger sacrificial altar, one many times greater than the previous one. Its structure resembled a gigantic mountain whose summit had been shaved flat. Tens of thousands of devil wizards floated through the air around it, using the blood of slaves to paint complex runes across its surface. At the outer edge of the altar, a massive devil army marched solemnly toward the center. They were clearly preparing to take advantage of this opportunity to send their forces into eternal peace. Could it be that they cannot cross this hole directly and must rely on the power of blood sacrifice for their warriors to pass through? Chinmu stared blankly at the phenomenon. He extended his hand forward, attempting to reach into the other world. Yet his palm collided with an invisible barrier. The other world lay plainly before him, but he could not step into it. The Divine Flood Dragon King and the Dragon Qilin also attempted the same. The stronger their power, the stronger the resistance they encountered. It was impossible for them to intrude into another world's time and space. Suddenly, a heavy crashing sound rang out, as though something massive had slammed onto the ground. The noise startled Chinmu and the others from their thoughts. A stone statue of a devil god had just been transported across from the other world. The 300-yard-tall statue stood silently to their right, roughly 300 yards away. Across its surface, runes formed from fresh blood writhed continuously, shifting and changing before gradually sinking into the stone. The statue suddenly trembled. Then, its enormous body slowly began to move. Clearly, the wizards of the otherworld had used the blood of slaves as sacrifices, granting the statue the ability to move on its own. However, the devil gods themselves were still unable to transmit their full power across the boundary. Thus, the stone statues could not yet return to living flesh. Quickly, go! The Divine Flood Dragon King immediately sprinted away, circling around the immense breach. Chinmu stood upon his back and looked behind them. He saw the stone statue bend its colossal body and crawl toward the earth, its arms bored into the ground like giant drills. In moments, the entire statue plunged headfirst into the soil. Soon there was no trace left that it had ever stood there. This stone statue also seems to be searching for something. What exactly is it looking for? Imperial Preceptor? Grandpa Blind? Are they still alive? If they are alive, where are they hiding? Chinmu activated his 9 Heavens divine eyes and carefully searched the surroundings for any trace of Imperial Preceptor and the others. As they continued traveling north, he began to notice signs of battle. Marks carved into the land revealed that Butcher and Blind had fought against the gods of high heavens here. Divine Flood Dragon King, be careful! Chinmu suddenly spotted a thin black line suspended motionlessly in midair. The Divine Flood Dragon King halted immediately. He, too, sensed that something was wrong. He circled around the black line cautiously. As his perspective shifted, the black line widened. It was actually a blade of knife light frozen in the air. The strike had sliced through space itself, yet had become stuck halfway. The divine art within the blade still retained its power, preventing space from healing. What a terrifying knife skill! The Divine Flood Dragon King shuddered. Such a blade could be called a divine knife. When a knife technique reached the realm of Tao, it became unstoppable and terrifying beyond measure. Grandpa Butcher is heaven knife, and this is pig slaughtering knife skills. Chinmu exclaimed in astonishment. He himself had once studied pig slaughtering knife skills. Yet he could never reach Butcher's terrifying level. Butcher's blade was simply too savage. Even if others learned his techniques, it would be extremely difficult for them to unleash their true power. Only someone as mad and wild as Butcher could fully release the strength of those knife skills. Further ahead, they encountered a vast sea of blazing fire melting the surrounding mountains. Even the encroaching darkness struggled to swallow those flames. Grandpa Mute's furnace has been shattered. Chinmu was shocked. That inferno had erupted from Mute's furnace. When the furnace shattered, the raging flames inside spilled out in every direction. Could Grandpa Mute have died? They crossed the sea of flames. Suddenly, Chinmu saw old Rulai. He was seated cross-legged in meditation. 20 heavens surrounded him. Gods and Buddhas of various sizes sat in his presence. Beside him stood a god of high heavens. The two faced one another in absolute stillness. Chinmu froze for a moment. Then he sighed softly. He bowed respectfully to old Rulai and gently lifted the old monk's body, placing it upon the back of the divine flood dragon king. They continued their journey. Hu Linger turned her head back and asked curiously, "Young master, why isn't that old monk moving? Why do you need to carry him?" Chinmu shook his head. "He has already taken that god down with him." Hu Linger was stunned. Before long, Chinmu discovered old Dao Master. The elderly Taoist clutched a sword technique in one hand while holding a sword in the other. An air of celestial grace surrounded him as he stood upright, his head raised proudly. Before him stood a god who had pulled half of his body from a mountain he had possessed. A faint smile lingered on old Dao Master's face. Divine light burst forth from Chinmu's eyes. He saw that the center of the god's brows had been pierced by a sword. The wound was extremely small, so small it was nearly impossible to notice. Chinmu looked again at old Dao Master. But his body was riddled with injuries, clothes torn, wounds everywhere. Yet the blood had already ceased flowing. "Is the old Taoist still alive?" Hu Linger asked quietly. Chinmu shook his head. He stepped forward and carefully lifted old Dao Master's body. Softly he said, "His blood has run dry. His final strike must have transformed his primordial spirit into a sword that pierced the heart of that god's brows. When the strike was completed, his primordial spirit transformed into Tao and exploded with power. The force destroyed both the enemy and himself. Once the strength of the move faded, the primordial spirit dispersed." People who walk different paths could not plan the same road. Though the Heavenly Devil Cult and the Tao sect followed different teachings, Chinmu still held immense respect for this old Tao master. Hu Linger grew solemn. She straightened her clothes carefully and bowed deeply. "A noble and righteous elder, one whose heart burned with fierce passion. I salute you." When the flood dragons saw this, they stood upright upon their hind legs and clasped their claws together. "Maha!" They continued forward until they saw a gigantic serpent lying across the ground. It was Willow Immortal. As they progressed, they saw fewer and fewer stone statues from the other world. Yet the atmosphere around them grew heavier and more oppressive. Fear crept into Chinmu's eyes. He dreaded seeing the corpses of Cripple, Granny C, and the others. He lifted Willow Immortal and placed the body onto the divine Flood Dragon King's back as well. Village Chief once said, "Someone must collect the bodies of the fallen." "Senior Sister Willow Immortal, I'm here. Follow me home." Soon afterward, they encountered White Immortal. His body was covered in silver spikes. A tangled ball of thread was caught upon them. In his hand, he still held a plate filled with silver needles. A massive hole had been torn through his chest. From that wound, a hand still protruded outward. He must have killed his enemy. Yet before dying, the opponent had still managed to strike him down as well. The surroundings had become completely silent. Only floating rocks drifted through the dark mist. Chinmu and the others walked forward. Suddenly, the magnetic force beneath their feet seemed to vanish. A strange field of power filled the area. Chinmu lifted his head to gaze at the stars. "Great overarching heavenly stars!" "Granny!" His heart skipped violently. Above them stretched a vast starry sky, created by the power of the great overarching heavenly stars' palm force. Within that star-filled sky sat Granny C. She remained motionless. The beautiful woman had her palm extended outward, as though she had just released her divine art. She looked incomparably majestic.